Harry's wife, the Rictus Grin. Hello. The Rictus Grin is something that is often seen with the narcissist. It's a fixed grin. Where does it come from? Well, as you know, the narcissist knows how to react in certain situations. Sometimes perfectly, others near perfectly. Others, there's a delay before the narcissist is able to adopt the requisite facial expression, pose, language, body language, and so forth, in order to pass off certain emotions that we don't actually experience. So, for instance, compassion is alien to us. We have to manufacture what we believe compassion looks like. Ditto happiness, and a range of other instances. If you want to understand more of the mechanics of this, please watch my excellent video, The Imitation Game. Essentially what happens is the narcissism selects the appropriate words, tone, facial expression, body language, look in the eye and so forth, and therefore causes the narcissist to utilize that or as close an approximation as the narcissism can muster in order to cause us to fit in. In some instances, the response is very clear and very accurate. In others, there's a delay before it comes because it's not natural. And in other instances, there's often an incongruous response. The narcissist might laugh at a situation where it wouldn't be found funny by anybody else. That the grin is too wide in circumstances where it isn't appropriate. That there's a wailing and gnashing of teeth by the narcissist, which again is over the top and is too much for the circumstances. This fixed grin is put on as a part of the imitation game, and also as a consequence of the receipt of the fuel that the narcissist is receiving, so that the narcissism creates the idea of happiness, but what it actually is an outward expression of how powerful the narcissist is feeling because of the receipt of the fuel that has been provided. The Rictus Grin is a false grin. It's not natural. It's not founded on emotional empathy. And what it is invariably a combination of what the narcissism thinks should be shown to the outside world and the way that the narcissist is responding to the receipt of fuel. Now, what I've done is I've taken a number of screenshots that arose from the service of booing. You'll recall that when Harry's wife turned up as Inspector Gadget gets booed. And these shots taken at various instances of her walking in and then taking her place as second row Sussex. And I'm going to provide you with a short narrative in relation to each one. It behooves me also to point out that these were first obtained on a thread on the St. Harry's Wife thread on Reddit, where somebody was pointing out the various facial expressions that she exhibited. And it occurred to me that I could purloin the screenshots that they had supplied and provide you with a more detailed narrative vis-a-vis her narcissism. But it is appropriate that I credit the appropriate Redditor that first furnished them on the Reddit thread on St. Harry's Wife. Thank you for pulling those out. So let's move on to the first picture. Here we see the sailors standing to attention as the Prince of Pink Pancakes wanders in, hand upheld, a bit of a wave and smile there. And of course, notice Harry's wife, she's there with the grip of doom, holding on to him, directing him and controlling him as the intimate part of the primary source. But there it is, the Rictus Grin, plastered on her face. It's unnatural, it's too much, it doesn't look right. And why is it there? Well, she's receiving fuel. There are people clapping, there are people cheering, there are people who are going, hooray, huzzah. Of course, there were some people booing, but it's still fuel, remember, because it's an acknowledgement of her. It's as a reaction to her presence. It's challenge fuel, and of course her narcissism will be essentially saying, ignore the haters, and thus she jettisons the thoughts about them, which provides her with that control. But the receipt of fuel from presumably a few hundred individuals outside waiting and watching, all tertiary sources of course, but cumulatively that's a decent dump of fuel that she's receiving right there. And because it's a reaction to her, it validates her existence, making her feel powerful, and thus the response of her narcissism is to fix that rictus grin on her face, that almost shit-eating grin, showing that she feels powerful. Those who are uneducated think, oh yes, she's smiling at everybody. But it's really the rictus grin, generated by an inability to smile naturally with warmth, because she's a narcissist, and the response to the provision of fuel. Our next still from the service of booing shows the Sussexes entering St. Paul's Cathedral. Prince of Pink Pancakes wandering along, still of course shackled by the grip of doom. And you'll notice that Inspector Gadget gets booed, still has a smug look there. The grin has disappeared. That's because the level of fuel that's being received has receded. The cheers might be echoing in the background, but now as there's entry into St. Paul's Cathedral, there's nobody necessarily around bar occasional individuals, not the number of people that there were outside. You can see that there's a soldier there saluting, and therefore that salute is the provision of fuel. There's another gentleman across the way who looks like he's giving them the side eye, thinking, here come those duplicitous shits. I wonder if they're wired for sound. But Harry's wife retains that smug look because she's still basking in the receipt of the fuel that has come from the cheering and the responses of those still around her. She's loving every second of it because it makes her feel important, validated. They're there reacting to her as she strolls in. There she is with the chimp officer on the leash, namely her hand, as she slurps up all of the fuel. And her narcissism cannot help but exhibit itself as a consequence of the smug look that's plastered across her stupid face. Next, they've entered St. Paul's Cathedral, and you'll recall that she sashayed down the aisle as if she was the queen of all living things. Once again, we can see that whilst there is no rictus grin, the level of fuel provided is not as great as it was outside, there's still that smug look plastered across her face. And it's because people are reacting. Heads are turning, people are looking. They might be whispering, oh look, it's the Sussexes. Goodness me, do you think he's had hair plugs put in? And what is she wearing? She looks like Inspector Gadget. And is that a battery pack that I can see? The reactions from people, again, whispering about her, commenting, looking in her direction, giving somebody a nudge to say, oh, look who it is. All of that provides fuel. And, once again, the receipt of which powers her and contributes to once again seeing the smug look upon her face. Hey up me duck, trouble at mill. Yes, and now a problem. It's the second row Sussexes, as they turn up and realise that they're shock horror. They are not in the front row, but they're shunted somewhere along the row in the second row. You can see a look of consternation on Harry's face. Not particularly keen about that. But also, of course, part of him will be thinking, shit, I'm going to get it in the bollocks off her later because we're not front and centre. Of course, what we then see, plastered all over Harry's wife's face, is a barely constrained look of fury. Note the way that her lips are set. She wants to say something, but the facade maintenance is fighting against the fury that is churning beneath the surface. The failure to put her on the front row wounds, and therefore her fury ignites as a means of attempting to make her assert control and nullify the threat to control posed by this, in what will be in her mind, a clear omission of being placed upon the front row. Being placed on the second row wounds. However, her facade says you can't go apeshit in front of all of these people. You can't pick up the chairs and fling them around. You can't shouting and screaming. You can't collapse to the floor crying. You have to hold it together and instead assert control in an alternative way. And thus, that picture captures brilliantly the transition from smug Rictus Grin, which has been removed, to the fight between her ignited fury and the facade trying to keep a lid on it. And we have this peculiar face, which is almost like a taut drum, isn't it? As she sort of tries to keep her face from exploding and showing what she truly feels about this situation. A similar photograph next, where we see, of course, the continuing reaction to being second-row Sussexes. Harry still can't quite believe it, and his expression is what looks like a mixture of annoyance and also nervousness. Her face shows again how the facade management is trying to keep her under control to ensure that ignited fury doesn't come to the surface. The eyes are widening. She cannot believe that they've been relegated to the position that they have. The mouth is set as if to say something, but so far remaining silent. But she's not able to disguise the reaction of horror to the situation that they've been placed in. Essentially, how dare we be placed on the second row? Do you know how important we are? Of course, their importance is waning, but this does not wash well with the narcissist. There's no fuel being given here, you see, and thus the Rictus Grin fades away and is replaced by the struggle between ignited fury and facade management. An entertaining picture here, which of course the Prince of Pink Pancakes is almost saying, what, we're expected to go in there? And Eugenie has a look of horror on her face going, oh shit, she's going to kick off now, isn't she? Of course, as always, we see the controlling arm placed upon Harry by his handler, part of the direct assertion of control. In the front, we can see Edward thinking, oh, ha! Yes, they're going to have to sit behind us. Oh, sweet joy, such sweet revenge over the odious duo. And of course, Sophie Wessex is looking directly at where they've got to go to, thinking, it's good enough for you, get to fuck. Then we have our final picture of the event from the front, which shows Harry not looking too pleased, looking like he's nodding off, but I think it's just caught him when he's blinking. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt for once. And of course, notice Harry's wife, the smug grin, has returned. Why? She's in receipt of fuel. People have been acknowledging her. People have been engaging with her. People have been responding to her. And therefore, the wounding that was occasioned by being placed in the second row is now dissipated as a consequence of her asserting control again, and the fact that she's been in receipt of fuel. All is well in the narcissist world. And of course, what we are then treated to is the ridiculous expression on her face. It's a solemn occasion. Look around everybody else that you can see in that photograph. Do you see anybody else with a stupid grin on their face? No, you don't. Everybody looks sincere. Indeed, I think is it Lady Sarah Chatto next to her? I might be mistaken. Who looks pleasantly, looks like somebody's actually poked her piles with a hot poker, thinking, no doubt, oh, for fuck's sake, I've got to sit next to her, have I? Everybody else, though, solemn, sincere, but not Harry's wife, once again demonstrating the incongruous nature occasioned by her narcissism with the situation, the smug look of entitlement that she has as a consequence of the receipt of fuel, and quite simply the way that her narcissism doesn't always fit in as well as it ought to compared to the way that other narcissists would. So there you have an excellent pictorial example of the way that fuel affects the narcissist, how wounding affects the narcissist, and the facial expressions that come with all of that vis-a-vis the Rictus Grin. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.